Annie, another one of my cats. She's a little bit more spicy. The claws are very sharp. Ow! What can I say? Hi folks and welcome back. Sitting writing this in March 2023, I've just finished the light tank script for the Army multi-kit builds, along with a single-seater fighter script based around the Bristol Bulldog. And through the odds of fate, I'm writing another tank script, just about immediately. And this is part of the challenge of this channel that I like. After all, I can't just rehash the light tank script. That's just not done. It's not cricket, old bean. The challenge of revisiting the information and finding the other stories that are hidden, waiting to be told, is just great. There is one piece of equipment designed in any post-Second World War British tank that only appears in British-designed tanks, and is unique to our culture. This bit of kit is what makes British tanks so darn good. In fact, the only British Challenger 2, our current main battle tank, to ever be lost in combat, was lost due to being shot at by another Challenger 2. It was probably over a disagreement about football, or whether custard cream biscuits truly are the king of all biscuits, or whether the chocolate hobnob has taken that post away from the custard cream. This bit of kit is the BV, and in fact if the BV fails, the tank will be taken off the line for repairs. The BV is a kettle. It is a device for boiling water or heating food in general, and being British, we need our tea. There is a story that goes around the internet, and its truth varies on who it is you talk to, as stories always get embezzled for the telling somewhat. In 2003, a British Challenger 2 was detracked in Basra, Iraq, and had to sit overnight before being recovered the following morning. Its crew of 4 trapped inside the vehicle. And in the dark of the night, the tank was besieged by enemy forces. 7.62mm machine gun ammunition depleted, all the crew could do was sit there and wait for dawn's early light to bathe them, reborn in the hope of being saved. At one point they could hear the sound, like that of a sledgehammer hitting the outside of the tank. And this is where the story varies. The sound was that of RPG rounds striking the tank. The amount differs depending on the teller, anything from 14 to 70, but I have heard 500 in one retelling. In the early morning, the armoured recovery column arrived to recover the tank, blackened from the attacks during the night. The expectation was that of a dead crew. As the lead vehicles pulled up and infantry deployed to secure the area, the commander's hatch of the tank opened. The commander, looking tired from a night's operations, is reputed to have asked for only one thing. Did anybody have any spare tea bags he could blag, as his crew had run out several hours earlier and were gagging for a brew? The BV was designed and entered service at the end of World War II. Research had been carried out into British tank losses, and it was discovered that nearly 40% of all losses happened when the crews were outside their vehicles. The next question was, why were they outside their vehicles? The most common reply was, "Sir, we were just brewing up," a term for making tea. It's not a task as simple as it sounds in a war zone, and the British method was that of the Benghazi burner. The term comes from the desert campaigns earlier in the war. By taking 2 petrol cans, the British design was a square tin, and cutting one of them open, you would fill it with sand, or soil if sand is not available, and then soak it in petrol. This you would light. The sand or soil acts as a reservoir and helps to keep the petrol from evaporating too quickly. The Benghazi burner was preferred by the troops as a military supplied pressure stove or cooker portable number 2 was very prone to not working, usually caused by blockages of sand or other fine particles in the burner heads. The downside to the Benghazi burner was firstly health and safety. If it ran out of fuel, the act of adding petrol was somewhat explosive, and normally very funny to watch if it's not one of your mates. Secondly, it's a very bad fieldcraft. The idea of a large flame burning away as you make tea or food is a wonderful target for the enemy. But then you have logistics to think about. The average battalion would go through 100 gallons of petrol a day just for the act of making tea, and that's before you get to the additional fuel needed for cooking. And the reason for drinking tea and not water? This was an error in the supply chain. Again, that art of logistics. Water during World War II in the British Army was brought up in petrol cans. Those cans at some point in their lives would have been used to carry petrol, and as such would leave contaminants in the can, making the water just about undrinkable. Tea hid the foul taste. And lastly, drinking tea for us Brits is something we do after a bad shock. It helps morale and bonds us as a group. Starting in 1942, the British government would buy all the black tea that was available on the market, therefore taking complete control of the supply of tea not only for the armed forces but the British home market as well, an action that might well have caused open revolt if it had been known at the time. Even working in frontline mental health services in the NHS, as I did for several decades, the act of tea after a violent interaction was a part of the debrief, as much at times for the patient as for the member of staff. As I was to discover one day dealing with a psychopath having a psychotic moment. This person only had around 12 words to their complete dictionary, so as you can imagine, conversation was challenging at times. As we approached the patient, in a 3-figure approach, that's Muggins here at the front to soak up the blows, and 2 members of staff behind me to get the patient to the ground, in what was hopefully going to be a controlled manner. The patient, walking towards us, started to punch holes in the glass windows. These are wire-reinforced safety glass, and this person is putting fist-shaped holes straight through the panes. I know this individual was killed before, and having been on the end of more than one beating from them, I have no great wish to receive another one. They said one thing to me on this approach, just one word, quite calm, not threatening at all. Tea. Needless to say, we all agreed that tea was a better option than a fight, medication for the patient, and quite possibly a member of staff off ill or dead. It turned out they'd missed the afternoon mug of tea, as had been out to an appointment, and on return the ward staff had forgotten the promise of the missing brew. While I didn't like their form of getting our attention, as well as the intended violence, if we hadn't kept our promise of getting them the brew, it was a better outcome. But tea goes back a long time in the British Army. In fact, there's a special form of tea drunk by the British Armed Forces. It's called gunfire. In the Korean War, members of the American military police, after assisting in a recovery mission, were offered the drink one morning. After all, us Brits are always nice, hospitable people, welcoming, friendly. And most squaddies hate red caps, another name for military police. And YouTube has toughened up its policy on foul language, so I won't mention the other names. The military police then drove back to their camp, demolishing the camp gates with the armoured recovery vehicle, and crashed their jeeps. After all, they were as drunk as skunks. I don't know. Police officer, drunk on duty. What has the world come to? Gunfire is made as follows: black tea, a shot of rum, in some cases a large shot of rum, and then pour it down your throat. For the British forces in World War II, tea would be listed in the top 5 items purchased in the war. And estimated on weight alone, the British government bought more tea than it did artillery shells and other explosives. And I can well believe it. After all, just writing this script, I've drunk 6 mugs, averaging at least 1 per hour. When I'm lost deep in thought, the first thing I do is make a cuppa. It has been and always will be a moment of social unity, a coming together. And the RAF caught on to this, bombing the occupied Netherlands with over 75,000 tea bags. The bags of tea were from the Dutch East Indies Company, and the message was very simple. The Netherlands will rise again. This is only a moment of darkness. The cold of this bitter night will pass. Have faith. The sun will rise. In the Second World War, the NAFI, or the Navy, Army, Air Force Institutes, would step up to support the forces. Starting the war, they had fewer than 600 mobile canteens and 4,000 personnel. The organisation would go on to run more than 8,000 canteens with 110,000 personnel. These mobile canteens would set up anywhere the forces were to supply tea and sandwiches in the UK. But they would also head out to the forward areas overseas to provide refreshments to troops on the front line. A moment of normality when all else seems to have gone mad. Some 550 NAFI members lost their lives providing this service overseas during World War II. But they weren't the only ones to provide refreshments to our armed forces. Post D-Day, the RAF stepped up to provide a vital service, a life-saving, dangerous mission: the beer runs. But that's a story for another time.